Welcome back. This is Dr. Pedro Pashojai with Interconnected. In the last episode, we learned of the amazing discoveries in our microbiome. There's enormous promise here with the prediction, prevention, and treatment of so many diseases. People are suffering. Our parents, our sisters, our brothers, our children, our coworkers. And now many believe that the missing piece has been found. It's time to connect it into our daily lives. And this episode gets right into the gut. It's where all the action's centered in the first place to start. We'll explore the gut's role in our well-being and learn about eating your way to a healthy microbiome. If you're living with headaches, memory loss, immunity issues, bloating, gas, or constant weight gain, you must balance the bacteria living in your gut. In this episode, we'll examine how scientific focus on the microbiome is turning the corner on illness. It's one thing to learn about what may be causing our pain, but the real question is, what can I do about it? Really, how can I start feeling better right now? Gas, bloating, brain fog, fatigue, and depression are just a few of the symptoms you may have your doctors quickly dismiss or throw pills at. So let's get into real solutions that you can enact today, taking health back into your own hands, even as you work with a good doctor. In a later segment, we journey into autoimmune disease. There's been a dramatic rise in rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's disease, multiple sclerosis, skin disorders, Crohn's and celiac disease, and a whole host of other issues. Why is this all happening now? What has changed in the world we live in, and what can the gut microbiome do about it? Let's get into it.
The microbiome is the game changer. It's just the game changer. How has your gut been nurtured in the last 30 years, 40 years? What's the environment of the gut like? It's not the same as your spouse's or your daughter's or your son's or your parents'. Everyone's gut is unique because of what we've put down there. Every forkful of what you put down there has an effect on the microbiome.
There's so much information. How I kind of explain it to people is, you have your laptop there. If I opened up your laptop, you probably see the motherboard flashing, lights and constantly flickering. But you're not really seeing that when you're using the laptop. You see that the backlight on your screen is on, you see that the cursor on the mouse is there, but what's going on in the background that actually makes that happen? That's kind of how I think of the microbiome. We perceive a very small fraction of the power of the microbiome in our regular day-to-day going-ons. And there's so much information that happens in the background, communication between the gut and the brain, and gastrointestinal motility, and other functions, hormonal impacts, that is happening in the background that we don't know. And these are the things that can contribute to our memory, to our moods, to a variety of other conditions.
Mrs. Patient, your intestines are a tube. The tube is 20 to 25 feet long. It starts at the mouth, goes to the other end, kind of winds around in your abdomen there a bit, And if you think of a donut, if you could stretch a donut out and you look down the hole, that's the center of the donut, that's your intestines, that's your digestive tract. So when you swallow food, it's still in the donut. It's not really in the body yet, it's in the donut. It's got to go through the walls of the donut to get into the bloodstream. And that lining, that inside lining of the intestines of the donut is a single cell layer called the epithelial lining. Tremendously important. And what happens is that epithelial lining can get torn. When it gets torn, then you have leaky gut.
There's interventional medicine, there's procedural medicine, there's all these types of things that are done. And then there's just, hey, it looks like you need to eat more broccoli, right? Like, so how much of that is actually, moving the needle clinically with your patients once you see this data and can make recommendations?
In my personal experience and practice, I think having the information available with regards to people's microbiome can be very helpful in management and giving them recommendations. You kind of wonder, you have a McDonald's cheeseburger, you may perceive the the taste from that and see how that makes you feel. But in the background, when digestion's occurring and the chemicals are breaking down and detoxification is occurring, all those things you don't feel or see, but those chemicals are being released. And later in the day, if you get annoyed or irritated or you can't sleep at night, you may blame it on something else, but we don't know yet exactly how all these mechanisms work, but these are some of the things that the microbiome is likely playing a role in.
There's a trilogy in the development of autoimmune diseases. First, you have to have the genetics for that particular disease. You can't do anything about that. That's the deck of cards that you've been dealt. Second, there is an environmental trigger that sets it off, the straw that broke the camel's back. The one that most people are familiar with is with the autoimmune disease celiac disease. The trigger is wheat or gluten. And third is intestinal permeability. The slang term is the leaky gut. That is the trilogy in the development of rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, scleroderma, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, celiac disease, vitiligo. The list goes on and on and on. When you read the studies, you arrest the development, and that's their language, arrest the development of autoimmune disease by healing the gut. That's why the gut is the most critical component. If there's only one organ that you're going to work on to be healthy, hopefully not, you also exercise and do other things, but if there's only one organ to address you get the most bang for your buck in your health, it's your gut.
At least 70% of our immune system is in the gut.
About 2 years ago when I had an endoscopy and I was diagnosed with celiac disease. So I refrained from gluten, very strict with that. And then about 6 months after that diagnosis, I had insidious onset of diverse gastrointestinal symptoms, inability to digest fats, and I was noticing weight loss. And concomitant with that, I noticed that I was sad in the morning. I had tearfulness, and I was very thin, and I wasn't trying to lose weight. I went down to about 100 pounds. I was seeing a gastroenterologist, and I had so much blood work, stool testing, and I even had an MRI of my pancreas. And it was determined that there was no explanation for my symptom. And with getting maybe a little specific for people who are suffering, I had floating stool. I was unable to digest fats, and I was taking digestive enzymes. I was trying to figure out the course of action for myself. I was on a paleo diet. So for me, it was getting to the right practitioner who could correctly diagnose me. And I'm very grateful for the fact that he diagnosed me with SIBO. I had a small bowel series to make sure that there was nothing structurally wrong. And then I had the breath test. It was a series of 3 hours of taking a breath sample every 20 minutes after you drink lactulose. And he determined that I had a strong positive. I had very high methane and hydrogen levels. And I was thrilled to have a diagnosis. And that started me on my journey.
No one's really looking for the microbiome. I mean, so how rare is it for a GI doc to even know to assess the microbiome, let alone talk about it?
The science is still new and cutting edge, but whatever information we can glean from the data that we retrieve that could be helpful, and we see that that's helpful. And the recommendations that come from that can help people have a little bit of control over their own health and understand what kind of bacteria are inside of them and how we can modulate them.
Every day I'm in disbelief that I'm in this body because I have gone from sickness to health, and I did it because I was persistent,
So in our world, we are sympathetically driven. And what that means is basically we are living in a constant state of stress. You may not even feel it within your body, but it is there. And how we know is because you have symptoms of diseases and don't heal, can't rest, can't sleep, don't digest well, get bloated, have headaches. These are all symptoms of being sympathetically driven. Blood is flowing to the extremities instead of flowing to the internal organs.
Now, you have an entire new body every 7 years. Some cells regenerate very quickly, like the inside lining of your guts every 3 to 5 days. Some cells are really slow, like bone cells are really slow. But you have a whole new body every 7 years. Well, the inside lining of the guts every few days. So if you tear the lining, it heals. That you build new cells and it heals. That's what happens with wheat. Why is it that 30% of the population has the genes for celiac disease, 30 to 33% depending on the study, but only 1 to 2% get celiac disease? Well, and everybody's eating wheat, that's the environmental trigger, but only 1 to 2% get celiac disease. It's because you've crossed the line somewhere and you have toast for breakfast, you tear the lining, it heals. You have a sandwich for lunch, you tear the lining, but it heals. You have pasta for dinner, you tear the lining, but it heals. Cookies, croutons on your salad, tear the lining, heals. Tear the lining, heals. Until one day, you don't heal anymore. Then you've got the leaky gut. And when you have the leaky gut, that is the gateway into the development of autoimmune diseases.
We want to try as much as possible to shift and promote parasympathetic state, because the parasympathetic state is where we rest, we digest, we heal, and we naturally eliminate better. And so there are a few things that help to do it, such as GABA, certain nutrients that you can take, GABA, magnesium, those will help to have a modulation and relax the body. But other things that are topically used that have a way of exercising that muscle are things like castor oil packs. And castor oil packs, that's probably one of its most important functions, because if you put a pack on the body, the effect is immediate because of the neurological effect that it's having on the brain and on the nervous system. So flipping that switch and putting the body into the parasympathetic state means you're going to be absorbing your vitamins and minerals that you're taking better. You're going to be improving your microbiome, because the sympathetic state, where cortisol is being driven through the body, actually creates a leaky gut and actually signals to bad gut bacteria to create a better environment for them. But if you can switch the body into a parasympathetically driven state, then you have less of a leaky gut. It actually, the gap junctions are all interconnected and strong and tight. Food can't go through, and you signal healthy gut bacteria.
So leaky gut is actually surprisingly common, and what leaky gut is basically loss of the body's ability to control what's allowed into the body. So it's loss of permeability control. So we normally allow a small leakage of the gut contents into the body all the time, so the immune system can surveil what's in the gut to make sure that if there's a bad bacteria, like one of these really severe infectious bacteria, it can mount an immune system response and get rid of it as quickly as possible. So avoid wheat, avoid NSAIDs, avoid alcohol. You'll stop damage in the gut. And then also, if you have food allergies, make sure you're not doing those as well, because they'll damage the gut. They want to promote healing of the gut. And that's where the right kind of bacteria come into play, because the right kind of bacteria will break down fiber in the diet and into molecules that are really easily used by the gut cells as energy sources. So you want to make sure you have plenty of fiber and the right kind of bacteria in the gut to heal the gut. And then there's certain nutrients you can use to help heal the gut. And it turns out one of the best ones are things like N-acetylcysteine to promote glutathione production, will help heal the gut. Glutamic acid is a great way of healing the gut. Way back in the 50s, there was research done on people with ulcers, stomach ulcers. They gave them cabbage juice. And cabbage juice helped get rid of stomach ulcers. And the reason they did that is because it's high in glutamic acid. So I tell people, eat a lot of cabbage family foods because they have high levels of glutamic acid that support the healing of the gut.
One of the really exciting things about the impact of diet on the microbiome is that you can see changes in the composition and function of the microbiome within a matter of days, which is really wonderful.
When someone makes the necessary adjustments, starts eating the broccoli and doing the things that we, would like them to do, how quickly do we start to see a shift in those colonies, and how quickly does that go downstream into butyrate production and all the things that would shift that kind of inflammatory cascade?
It needs to become a lifestyle habit. It's not something that you can do once a week or a couple of days in a row and expect to have long-term effects. It needs to really become part of how you approach living. And certainly if you're looking at reversing some of the effects of inflammation, reversing some of the effects of a leaky gut, that healing is going to take a little bit longer. But the changes in the microbiome are quick and they are profound.
The microbiome talks to the immune system. There's cross communication from the immune system that's inside the lining of the gut to the microbiome that's on the outside of the gut. They talk back and forth. There's this crosstalk. So the immune system is asking the sentries that are out there in the tube, what's going on out there? And the microbiome is sending messages of warning or messages of everything's good right now. That crosstalk is going on all the time, back and forth. What happens is that we develop a microbiome over time that may be so inflammatory, it's tearing the lining by itself. The microbiome, when you have high concentrations of some of the bacteria that aren't supposed to be there in those high concentrations, they trigger, the immune system says, whoa, that's way too many messengers coming through. We need to get rid of some of those messengers. We're getting mixed messages here. The immune system will then go after some of that microbiome. So you get this inflammation going on constantly, 24/7. Until the microbiome changes. When you get tears in the lining of the gut, the leaky gut, the term is pathogenic intestinal permeability. Mrs. Patient, when you eat a protein, proteins are like a pearl necklace. Hydrochloric acid made in your stomach undoes the clasp of the pearl necklace. Now you have a string of pearls. Your enzymes that are produced by the pancreas, the gallbladder, the microbiota themselves, your enzymes are scissors to cut that pearl necklace into smaller clumps and smaller clumps and smaller clumps until you get down to each individual pearl of the pearl necklace. Now the inside lining of your gut is lined with cheesecloth, and the cheesecloth only lets really small stuff get in to the body. So each pearl of the pearl necklace, called an amino acid, can go right through the cheesecloth to get into the bloodstream. Then your body uses those pearls, those amino acids, to make new muscle, new bone cells, new enzymes, everything that we need for life. That's how we get our building blocks to build new cells.
The typical approach with a person with leaky gut is, as always, you'll hear me say this every time, is stop the causes. What's causing leaky gut? The primary cause of leaky gut are the consumption of wheat and the consumption of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Okay, and I'll add to that Tylenol as well. Not strictly speaking, it's not an NSAID, strictly speaking. But these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs cause increased gut permeability, as does excess alcohol consumption.
We know that the immune system is regulated through the gut, through the microbiome, that leaky gut can play into it, that oftentimes people have developed food sensitivities that they didn't necessarily have, day one of life, but they might have developed later on. I think what hasn't been happening is that people aren't asking the right questions. The right questions are, what are you eating every day? What medications have you taken over the course of your lifetime? Were you born C-section or vaginally? Because we know that has long-term implications. When did your symptoms, whatever they may be, start, and what was happening in the context of your life at that time?
How do you interface with the microbiome in, not just how you parse your data and all this kind of stuff, but how do you approach this whole conversation of microbiome in your treatments?
It's become easier than ever, I would say, to talk about the microbiome just because of the incredible amounts of research that have come out, because of its place now in popular culture. You have trillions of bacteria living in and on you. You have 6+ pounds in your gut. And I wouldn't say that we're anywhere close to understanding everything about them. In fact, we don't even know how to identify everything that's there or not there. But I think we're closer to knowing what we don't know. And then we're obviously proving literally every single day the impact that the microbiome has on your mood, regulating your immune system, your ability to absorb nutrients, even your metabolic rate and your thyroid hormones. And so we understand that, let's say, it does a lot.
When you get tears in the cheesecloth, clumps of the pearl necklace get through before they've had enough time to be snipped small enough. So that's one of the reasons why your intestines are 20 feet long, is that it takes a whole lot longer to break down prime rib than it does a banana. And so when you get tears in the cheesecloth, clumps of beef, in this example, can get through into the bloodstream. They're called macromolecules, really big molecules. They're not supposed to get in there, but they do. And your immune system says, whoa, what's this? I can't use this to build healthy new tissue. I better fight this. Now you make antibodies to beef. Now you're allergic to beef and tomatoes and cucumbers. And when someone does a 90 food blood test to see what foods they might be sensitive to, it comes back and says they're sensitive to 20 or 30 different foods. And the patient, oh my God, that's everything I eat. Well, of course it is. Your immune system's trying to protect you. Your immune system is the armed forces trying to protect you. It's not going haywire and has to be suppressed. What we have to do is ask the question, why is your immune system protecting you? Well, these macromolecules cause the antibodies to 20 different foods in your blood test, Mrs. Patient, but that's because there's tears in the cheesecloth, and we have to heal the intestinal permeability, the tears in the cheesecloth. When we do that, then you wait 3 to 6 months, you check again, now you're sensitive to 2 foods, maybe 3. So where do the tears in the cheesecloth come from? There's 3 areas, no question, every time tears in the cheesecloth can come from. One is wheat. No question, every time you eat wheat, you get tears in the cheesecloth. Many studies show that, whether you feel symptoms or not. When you eat wheat, you get intestinal permeability. But fastest growing cells in the body, the inside lining of the gut, you heal. Toast for breakfast, you heal. Sandwich for lunch, you heal. Pasta for dinner, you heal. Until one day you don't heal anymore, you cross the line. Second, after wheat, is called lipopolysaccharides. That's the exhaust of gram-negative bacteria. That will cause tears in the cheesecloth, and that comes from the third component is the microbiome. If you have dysbiosis, an imbalanced microbiome, those bacteria that are in too high a concentration in the gut trigger an immune response and will tear the lining of the cheesecloth.
The problem is that when we can do things like consume wheat, for example, for 3/4 of the population, every time they eat wheat, they cause themselves to have a bit of leaky gut. Okay. So one reason why so many people with chronic disease do better by stopping eating wheat is that even though they may not be allergic to wheat, because of its molecular makeup, causes increased gut permeability. So you control gut permeability and you improve pretty much all diseases. The way to determine how leaky a person's gut is typically done with a laboratory test. We give a person 2 molecules, one of which is supposed to be very easily absorbed by the gut, one of which is supposed to be very poorly absorbed by the gut. And you look at how efficiently they're both absorbed. In people with leaky gut, what happens with them is they get a lot more absorption of molecules they're not supposed to be able to absorb.
Our ancestors may not have had the actual science knowledge base that we have now. What they said and what things like Hippocrates said thousands of years ago is actually quite true. I tell people in my office jokingly that, Hippocrates may not have known what he was talking about, but he was spot on. Let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. And, one man's poison is another man's medicine. These are the things that we're talking about now, and these are hot topics in the science literature, but they've known about this for years.
Let's go through the kind of laundry list of all of these downstream things that people are suffering from, Hashimoto's and all these things, and just kind of come back upstream to this autoimmunity and connect these dots, because I think this is a very compelling case that you're drawing here.
In this mechanism that we're talking about psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, Hashimoto's thyroid disease, Graves' thyroid disease, cerebellar ataxia, when old people can't walk very well. They have to hold the railing walking up and down the stairs. Rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, scleroderma, vitiligo, when you have white spots on your skin, you're losing the coloring in your skin. These are autoimmune diseases that can originate by this mechanism of intestinal permeability and molecular mimicry. There are many studies on this. This is really exciting because it's the cutting edge. We now know the mechanisms that initiate and fuel the development of autoimmune diseases. So when people understand this, when they learn this, and they say, well, wait a minute, what about my condition, ... whatever it is, and they look into this and they look at their gut, they say, oh my gosh, this relates to me. That's really great, I'm glad to learn this. And then they start applying the principles, you see the changes start occurring fairly quickly.
So we've learned here that a single cell layer in our guts is what separates our inside and outside worlds. Bacteria that live in the gut are a major factor in what gets through and what sets off a fire. Inflammation is the mother of all disease, and it starts right here. We learned that wheat, dairy, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and other substances could be harmful to this lining and could cause a leaky gut. And if you get that, you can develop allergies and sensitivities to the foods you eat most because those are the molecules that sneak through into your bloodstream. The good news? Healing a leaky gut can reverse some serious diseases. It starts with taking away the foods that harm us and our microbiome. Here are the key takeaways from this segment. A leaky gut is pathological intestinal permeability. It means little micro tears in gut lining that allow food and other particles to sneak through. Macromolecules are particles of food entering the bloodstream, which is not supposed to happen. 100 trillion microbes live in the gut. That's over 6 pounds of living species that are part of our biology. They have critical roles in many areas that we're just beginning to understand. Some of the foods to avoid for leaky gut are wheat, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, Tylenol, alcohol, and dairy. Some of the things you can heal the gut with are fiber, N-acetyl L-cysteine, and glutamic acid. We've put together a comprehensive guide on supplements and herbs that heal the gut in the Interconnected Companion Guide. I sincerely hope you're enjoying this episode, and we'll get right back to it in a second. First, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. As you know, Interconnected is available free to watch for the next 9 days. You can watch every episode for free for 24 hours before it's replaced with the next one. However, if you'd rather watch the episodes in your own time, you also have the option to own the entire series, which also comes with several bonuses and resources. You watch and you rewatch at your own pace in your own time, and so just below this video, you'll find a link to the full Interconnected docuseries, along with a number of these powerful bonuses I've been talking about that'll help put into practice what you've learned here, all at a discounted price. And we've created a number of incredible resources that aren't included in the free premiere of this series. We're also hosting 2 live Q&A sessions with some of the experts, these renowned experts that you see in this series. I'm going to bring them on to answer your questions. And if you want to discover the mysteries of the microbiome and how it could help you heal no matter what your ailment or health challenge, I encourage you to invest in the full set. Plus, some of the proceeds are going to help us fund new discoveries and continue to share this information with the world. Make sure you check it out. We learned that the gut is where we interface with the outside world. In a future bonus episode, we'll also hear about how the skin, gums, and teeth are also relevant in this. So why is this so important? Because this is where our body's immune systems decide what's safe to enter, who's friend or foe. If we have leaky gut and imbalances in our microbiome, our immune systems get overworked, and this can lead to overreactions in our response. This is where the body could turn on itself and become autoimmune disease, which is rising in epidemic proportions.
So our microbiome that lives in our gut with our immune system just on the other side of it. When there's, I like to see this, our gut membrane is in between. So our immune system, think of it as on one side, the microbiome on the other, with our gut membrane in the middle. And as we like to say, good fences make good neighbors, right? So as long as that's there in that, balance, everything works really well. And our immune system is ready to go, but not on overdrive and attacking itself. Now, if you start to break down those fences or break down those barriers, and even good microbes that are on one side of that fence get through to our immune system will now go, uh-oh, you're on the wrong side. You were supposed to be on the other side of the fence. Now you're on this side of the fence, and it starts to attack it and mounts an inflammatory response, which can spread to the rest of the body and result in our immune system attacking our own body.
Well, what we've learned over the past decade is that our immune system is actually augmented or primed by the microbiome. In other words, the microbiome improves the function of our immune system. It augments certain activities that are not found in the absence of a microbiome.
But then, if that beautiful interaction gets broken or that balance is disrupted, then the immune system can now turn on itself and start attacking itself. And that's, what we call autoimmune disease. So if your immune system is attacking your joints, we call that rheumatoid arthritis. If it's attacking your skin, we call it psoriasis. So there's so many of these. They're all the same process of our immune system attacking itself or attacking us.
So again, it's a conceptual shift in thinking that the immune system actually requires certain bacteria, non-infectious bacteria, for its optimal activity. And if the immune system doesn't function properly, then that actually results in human diseases. So again, beyond infectious disease, an overactive immune system results in allergy, results in autoimmunity, such as multiple sclerosis and lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And again, all of these disorders being linked back to the microbiome, at least largely in animal models, but in some human studies, suggest that modulation of the immune system by the microbiome may be a potential therapeutic option for allergy and autoimmunity.
So you personally have had a journey with rheumatoid arthritis. Could you speak to kind of your journey and how you got into this mess and out of it?
And so I had a very bad fortune that in my early 20s, I developed early onset rheumatoid arthritis. And at that time, well, it was autoimmune disease. The best thing that doctors could tell me is take ibuprofen for 2 weeks, and then before ibuprofen causes its side effects, switch to aspirin for 2 weeks, and then before it causes side effects, switch to Tylenol for 2 weeks, and just alternate. And if you develop an ulcer, well, we'll treat an ulcer with all kinds of other drugs, and then we'll have to monitor your liver and kidneys, and if those get damaged, we'll have to give you other drugs. In late 2014, I read a scientific paper published by Dr. Ajit Varki from University of California in San Diego. And in this paper, he discussed how low-level chronic inflammation could be caused by a sugar. It's a sialic acid sugar that is produced by other mammals, but is not produced by humans. And so if we consume mammalian products, we can actually integrate it into our own cells, and our immune system will recognize it as not self because we don't have the ability to produce it. But because sugars are not very immunogenic, they're going to only activate the immune system to a very mild degree. But it's this chronic hyperactivity of the immune system that caused me to have these symptoms. I simply stopped cold eating all mammalian products. So that's all dairy, all lamb, pork, beef, anything that comes from mammals. And a month later, I knew this was it. It took a month for noticeable effects. And about 6 months later, my symptoms had reversed. And so 6 months after I stopped eating the diet, I was again in the same shape that I was back when I was 16.
When you disrupt it, that's when you start to cause disease. So you disrupt it in so many ways. First of all, our gut microbiome can get disrupted by drugs such as antibiotics. That's one type of drug, but many other drugs can also disrupt our microbiome and kill these bacteria. Our diet, things with processed foods also disrupt these bacteria. Stress can disrupt the bacteria. We know that stress actually causes certain pathogenic bacteria to grow more. So there's many things that can disrupt this beautiful ecosystem, and when that happens, that synergistic relationship is broken. And so now they can't do what they're supposed to do to keep us healthy.
So in 2008, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease that the immune system attacks the thyroid, and the result of that is the thyroid starts failing. A big part of my problem was obviously my gut health was a mess, and I had no idea. I wasn't connecting the dots. I wasn't in the health space at that point yet. So that was a real wake-up moment, just to realize that my own immune system is killing my own body, and there's something I have to be able to do about it. Yet there were no resources back then, and so that's what got me on the path of research and investigation of just what is it I can do for myself to reverse this and stop it.
So there's a great amount of disease that we've seen. Can you speak to the role of the microbiome in immunity and immune modulation?
The function of your microbiome, first and foremost, is to keep you safe from disease. is to make sure that your immunity is at its highest level. Is to make sure that your metabolism is optimized to the nth degree. So when this microbiome is affected, your immunity is decreased. Your hormone metabolism is decreased. Your fight and flight response is completely out of whack. So you as a person trying to operate in the world with a microbiome that is not optimized, it's like trying to have somebody walk on a thin line between two buildings with a lot of wind coming in, and there's there's not a balancing beam for the person to balance out. It's impossible for the system to be balanced with all these external forces coming in and affecting how it operates. So I think when you look at immunity and you look at what's happening in the world in the last half a decade, for instance, or the last 25 years, with this explosion in the number of people living now, with the incredible amount of mass-produced foods that we make, with the lack of disregard for the environment and how that is affecting our everyday life, the stuff that we're breathing today, the amount of hours that we're driving, the amount of stress that we're living under nuclear threats these days, all of this will decrease the function of the microbiome because stress will kill the good bacteria. And when the good bacteria is killed, the opportunistic infections created by the bad bacteria kicks in.
One of the key things to understand about how important the microbiome is that the microbiome is involved with something in immunology called tolerance. And tolerance means your immune system's ability to tolerate you. And there's 3 different types of tolerance. There's self-tolerance, which means you don't attack your own body. There's chemical tolerance, which means you don't react to chemicals around you, like smelling gasoline or perfumes and things like that. And there's dietary protein tolerance, which is involved with food sensitivity and reactions. Well, what we know is that when the microbiome loses its diversity, we lose our tolerance.
Give me a kind of a longer tail download of how it sucked having thyroid disease and your path out. Like I want to kind of extract your story from this because you've lived it.
I was diagnosed with thyroid disease after almost 10 years of really strange symptoms. So I had chronic fatigue, I had irritable bowel syndrome, I had panic attacks, acid reflux, carpal tunnel syndrome, hair loss, weight gain, weight loss, you name it, I had it. I had just about every single symptom in the book. And I didn't really know that there was anything I could do about it. First of all, I didn't get the right kind of tests. And eventually, when I even did get the right kind of tests, I was just told that I could take a medication. As a pharmacist, I was more than happy to take any medication that anybody would give me, right? But at the same time, the medications didn't help me feel significantly better. They helped a little bit. I went from sleeping for 12 hours to 11 hours, and from wearing, 2 jackets in Southern California to actually being able to just wear 1 jacket. But I was still struggling a lot in my day-to-day life. I felt like I couldn't get anything done that I wanted to do. I was very ambitious, yet all I could do after work is come home and sit on the couch and watch a little TV and maybe pass out. And I really didn't feel like I was living my best life. I withdrew from people. I withdrew from my dreams. I really withdrew from life because of this condition. I got the diagnosis and I got the medications, and I thought this was going to be a great way to turn things around, and maybe I would feel better. Maybe I would feel like myself again. Yet I didn't really feel that much better. So I wanted to figure out if there was anything I could do to get myself well again. That's how I really became a Hashimoto's expert / human guinea pig, was through trying different things to get myself well. And there were things that really made a difference, such as changing up my diet. There were supplements that I took because I was nutritionally deficient. There were changes that I made to my microbiome. I utilized a lot of different probiotics and a lot of different protocols to really get things into balance. And, it's been life-changing to have my brain back. It's been life-changing to be able to move, to go to yoga class, to not sleep for 12 hours each day.
So when we look at the cause of inflammation, we know that it has to do with our environment and our lifestyle. We are really faced with this environment today where the foods we eat, the chemicals we get exposed to, the things we do all have an impact on various things, including the gut microbiome. And the expression of our immune response and how we respond to the environment and what it does to us really has this interplay and this dance between the different bacterial species that we all have in our guts.
If you look at these epidemics of autoimmune diseases, so we create, a situation in which now you increase fast this autoimmune process in terms of the impact on the human population in a very short period of time. So in other words, we're doing something wrong to increase the number of people that come down with autoimmunity. But if you want to see the same glass half full, that means that if we understand what we did wrong, we can stop these epidemics. And doing that means that, autoimmunity is not a destiny. As a matter of fact, the recipe for chronic inflammatory diseases, including autoimmune diseases, is much more complex than we predicted before. For sure, you have to have genetic predisposition and an environmental trigger, an environmental factor, no question about that. But there are at least other 3 elements at play.
So many clinicians are then going back to diet, nutrition, and lifestyle, trying to impact various factors that change their microbiome to help change these patterns. It's not uncommon for a practitioner to work with a patient suffering from inflammatory autoimmunity, make diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and then see these antibodies to their brain reduce or no longer show up.
So the antibodies are there, but well before that, upstream, you're stopping the insult, but then, you could fix the leaky gut, you can modulate. What were the 5 pillars, just so I have them clear?
Your genetic predisposition, that means you have to have many genes, not a single one, for multifactorial diseases like autoimmunity to be at risk. An environmental trigger that is mismanaged because of this genetic predisposition. An intestinal barrier that is jeopardized, so allows this to interact. An immune system that becomes hyperbelligerent, and a microbiome that is off balance, what we call dysbiosis.
But unfortunately, in a vast majority of cases where the microbiome has been linked to an autoimmune condition, we don't know the specific organisms which are mediating those health benefits, and therefore we don't know their molecules. But this is ongoing work. Many laboratories are interested in identifying particular organisms and molecules as a mechanism to develop new therapies.
There isn't a field in medicine that isn't impacted by the gut microbiome. Gut microbiome research has been shown in nephrology journals and cardiology journals and endocrinology journals, and you name it, it's out there. So there's just huge advances in research, and they're finding how the gut microbiome impacts all disease. And this may be where the evidence really goes back to, if you really are doing an evidence-based model, you really have to consider gut diversity, diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and various variables that impact our bacteria in our gut.
We've come full circle and realized that the doctors of antiquity were right. Health begins in the gut. And now we can see beyond that and realize that a healthy gut harbors a healthy microbiome. This is where it all starts. Yet we all have a unique makeup, leaving us with different symptoms, but the role of the microbiome is central to whether it becomes a disease or how it expresses. Our uniqueness can make it very hard to find the cause, but like any good gardener would say, if you see a disease in a leaf, go look at the root of a plant. Here are some important things to remember. Your immune system is your body's defense against pathogenic invaders. Autoimmune disease is your body attacking itself, often by mistake. Our gut microbiome helps regulate the immune system and inform us of the environment outside. There are 3 types of tolerance to speak of. Self-tolerance, when you don't attack your own body by mistake. Chemical tolerance, your ability to tolerate toxins and poisons around you. And food tolerance, your ability to tolerate the molecules you digest and ingest. The 3 main factors that determine how you react to something are your genetic predisposition, an environmental trigger, and your intestinal barrier, or what we've been calling gut permeability. We now move to the cutting edge of science. Labs around the world are racing to understand how to cure chronic disease with our new discoveries in the microbiome. Testing is key. No 2 people are the same, and that means their treatment won't be the same either. But it's got to involve healthcare professionals who make this part of their practice. That brings us to the exciting field of functional medicine and the new approach that these open-minded doctors are taking to keep you healthy.
Functional medicine is a new way of thinking about disease. It focuses on the root causes. It focuses on the body as a whole system where everything's connected. It focuses on the why, not the what. Not what disease do you have and what drug do I give, but why is there imbalance in the body and how do we restore balance? How do we get rid of the things that are creating disturbances and how do we add the things that are creating health? And it's a very simple model in concept. Sometimes it's more complicated to practice, but it has profound effects across a spectrum of chronic disease.
And so what I love about functional health is that it looks at all of these aspects of you, what you're eating, your entire personal history from when you were born until now, some of the amazing diagnostic data we have now, like the microbiome and genomics. And we take all of that in functional health, and then we use that whole picture of you to help guide you to better health.
No, I've seen so many people who have chronic illnesses get better when we fix their gut. This is the foundational principles of functional medicine. This is not new. It's something we've been working with for 30 years and is now catching on as this new discovery. But we've known this for a long time. It's where we start with anybody who has a chronic illness.
I think that when you're looking at various chronic diseases and comparing again how conventional physicians or allopathic physicians are looking at it, it's sort of a reductionist model. They're really looking at, for example, in diabetes, we're addressing blood sugar. We're addressing these specific markers, and we're not necessarily getting at the root cause of why are they out of balance. So there's going to always be a bit of an individuality to how this disease or condition manifests. And if you look at these root causes, if you look at the underlying factors, then you can start to see these nuances that are different between individuals that can actually kind of help you hone in on an approach that might work better than just taking a one-size-fits-all type approach.
Pretty much everyone watching this is going to go to some doctor and ask about this stuff, and their doctor is going to go, huh? Right? So like, let's talk about like the time it takes for innovation to get to like Main Street doctors and some of those challenges.
So we have an interesting set of challenges that I think are really unique to right now. So first of all, there's almost 1 million new publications, peer-reviewed, published journal articles that come out on PubMed every year right now. How can any individual doctor, no matter how smart they are, no matter how well-trained they are, how can they keep up? They can't. The second issue is that it takes about 17 years for new information to make its way into medical education, meaning I went to Columbia for med school, I had a phenomenal education, but they even told us in our first day of medical school that 50% of the information that we were learning was probably wrong, and the problem is we just don't know which 50%. And this is at one of the top medical schools in the country. And that's not because people aren't intelligent and well-meaning and resourced, it's just because new information is moving faster than we can.
We're not really taught to get to the root cause of what is causing someone's GERD or heartburn. So unfortunately in conventional medicine, that's not something that's taught. I went to medical school 10 to 15 years ago, and we really didn't talk about the microbiome. And now the microbiome is such a big topic, maybe not in conventional medicine, but more functional medicine, integrated medicine, and we're still learning a lot about it and how it contributes to overall health and well-being and mental wellness too.
When I was diagnosed kind of with the fibromyalgia, I started seeking all kinds of help. I started with a rheumatologist first, and they started me on antidepressants. That's what they actually use to treat fibromyalgia.
So in allopathic medicine and traditional medicine, conventional medicine, we're looking for a pill for every ill, and that's just not, it just doesn't work. For chronic disease, you have to have a multifactorial approach to wellness or optimize health.
Many people don't realize this, but 90% of our health is determined by social, behavioral, and environmental factors. Only 10% of your health is determined by medical interventions. And all of the technology in medicine, the electronic medical records on which doctors now depend to do their day-to-day job, right? We all have digital tools, that's what we use in medicine. Most of them, if not almost none of them, capture these social determinants of health. So 90% of you, what you're eating, your relationships, your supplements, your exercise, the genomics, the microbiome, your health history, your family history, your environmental exposures, none of these are captured in the electronic records that a doctor is looking at. So as a result, a doctor is looking at this teeny tiny sliver of you. And what do you people, not doctors, but people do when They have limited information. Well, they act on what they can see. And so that means they prescribe drugs and refer to specialists because they can't take into account this whole picture.
Then I contacted my gastroenterologist, and she was not, really versed in it, but she gave me someone, thankfully, who is. And so that's when I went to see Dr. Marvin Singh here in Encinitas, and he's the one who got me onto the microbiome, and that's changed my life.
One of the most profound stories I had was somebody who came to me. She comes and says, you're probably the 7th gastroenterologist I've seen. This is how our conversation started like that. You're probably the 7th gastroenterologist I've seen. I'm not sure you're going to be able to help me at all. And I sat back, I put the computer away, stopped taking notes, and I just had a conversation. Talked to her about her life, what kind of food she was eating, how she grew up as a child. And then we had a conversation about nutrition and, mindfulness, meditation, and a lot of lifestyle medicine type topics.
And so now I am on this with the microbiome to hone in on it, just like you can't believe, because I've looked at it now as just a lifesaver, that this is what's going to take me to where I can be just the absolute best that I can be, and to change my health from being something that was poor to something that's going to be excellent.
She came back 3 months later, and I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I've only had 3 panic attacks in the last 3 months. I used to have them every day. I'm exercising, my diarrhea stopped, I'm meditating, and I feel like $1 million."
The microbiome is always a piece of what I'm thinking about with regard to my patients. And oftentimes it's the gastrointestinal microbiome, but of course we've got we're covered in organisms. They are everywhere. So we need to think about all the various environments, depending on what they're presenting with clinically. But certainly, the pounds of microbial activity in our gut is one of the most important areas that we can leverage to influence the course of health in our patients. We're talking about the gastrointestinal tract as being, housing about 70% of our immune system. So inflammation is an upregulated immune system. Our major leverage area is going to be taking care of what's going on with our gut. What's our microbiome look like? What, of course, is our diet? What micronutrients do we need? Our microbiome makes a load of really important vitamins. Do we have adequate amounts of them? Vitamins and minerals are essential for us to make good neurotransmitters. B6, magnesium, folate, etc., required to make serotonin and melatonin.
When I was in my undergraduate studies, I wanted to go into orthopedic surgery. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but my advisors told me, well, you're kind of a burly guy, and those guys do well as orthopedic surgeons, so just do that. So very little purpose behind that, but I figured, why not? And at 23 years of age, I went from having tons of energy and just, I guess, feeling like most normal 23-year-olds, but I was also a college athlete and had a lot of energy. And then all of a sudden, I started having fatigue, depression, insomnia, that was really bad. Feeling cold, thinning hair, and I didn't know why. Just all of a sudden started happening. And I was eating well, I was exercising, I was doing what I loved, I wasn't overly stressed. So I figured, well, this is what the profession that I'm going to go into is meant for. So I went and I saw an endocrinologist, an internist, and a GP, and all their tests came back normal. Yeah, you're the picture of health, you've got good muscle tone, you've got low body fat, your cholesterol looks great, your blood pressure looks great. And I remarked, well, did you get that bit I told you about, how I'm feeling terrible? And they said, well, there's nothing here that we see that we can help. And I actually ended up finding an alternative doctor who practiced functional medicine, and he said, you might have an intestinal parasite. And I remember thinking to myself, this guy's nuts. Like, I don't have diarrhea. I didn't go to Mexico and then have food poisoning and then all this started. Nothing there seemed to fit. But I figured, what do I have to lose? I did a stool test. I figured out that I had an infection in my intestines, and that was really what was driving all of my symptoms. And before I figured that out, I spent probably 6 months to a year going on the internet reading about adrenal fatigue and hypothyroidism and heavy metal toxicity, and I thought I had all these conditions, and I spent a lot of money on supplements to treat those things and didn't really get anywhere until I addressed the root cause of the issue in my gut. And then I totally changed my career path to go into integrative medicine with a focus on gut health. And now my experience is true for so many of my patients. They come in chasing down all these symptoms that they think are heavy metal toxicity or hypothyroidism that can't be diagnosed, or adrenal fatigue. And in many of those cases, it's actually a problem in the gut that hasn't been identified that allows them to get healthier.
This type of thinking of just like, well, diagnosis, pharmacological agent, just masking symptoms and not kind of swimming upstream, has been plaguing medicine for years. And it sounds like it's also been plaguing the scientific research community of just being like, well, I need a control.
Modern medicine, modern Western medicine, has really approached health and disease very much almost from an organ or tissue specific approach. There is cardiovascular disease, which is separate from kidney disease, which is separate from mental illness. Even if you look at the National Institutes of Health, this is an organization whose various institutes are very much organ and or disease centric. And this approach to medicine is completely different from what we almost pejoratively call alternative medicine. I prefer to think of it as more holistic medicine. It's the idea that everything in our body is interrelated, is interconnected. And what the field of microbiome research has really forced us to do relatively recently is acknowledge that not only are we a system of multiple organs and tissues that work together, but living in us and on us is this incredibly complex ecosystem of microbes that play a tremendously important role in health and disease by interacting with each other and by interacting with us as a host.
Often people might not have digestive symptoms. Sometimes they do. And I always connect the dots. If someone has inflammation, the likelihood is it's coming from their gut. And so if someone has an inflammatory disease, and we know that almost every chronic disease is inflammatory, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, cancer, dementia, depression, autism, Alzheimer's, these are all inflammatory problems. When anybody has an inflammatory problem, my first thought is always what's happening in the gut.
Our gut microbiome is only 10 to 20% similar between each human being. So there's a lot of diversity there. Imagine if there are over 100 trillion bacteria that can be in any person's gut, and that me and you are only 10 or 20% similar. There's so many different variations and ways the populations can be skewed, and what types of products those bacteria are producing is also another thing.
And so we do an assessment based on their symptoms, and we look at diagnostic tests in their stool, and we put the story together, and we remove the things that are creating imbalance in the gut, whether it's a parasite or whether it's an imbalance in the flora, or whether it's overgrowth of various things like yeast, or whether it's insufficiency of the healthy bacteria, whether it's leaky gut that's triggered by gluten or some other food sensitivity. We fix all those things. We remove the things that are creating a problem, and then we replace the things that are missing. If there's digestive enzymes needed or other support, prebiotics, we get probiotics to reinoculate and support the gut. And then we use various nutrients to repair the gut, which is things like glutamine and zinc, fish oil, vitamin A, curcumin, quercetin. These are just nutrients that the gut needs to actually repair and heal. So we put that all together in a therapeutic program, regardless of what the disease is. If it's rheumatoid arthritis, if it's autism, if it's psoriasis, if it's depression, often we'll get better by simply fixing those things.
It was a couple of years ago that I did a PubMed search looking for microbiome, and I had a very long list of diseases, all of which had been described as having a component of low-level inflammation, and it was over 40 diseases. And I was shocked at how many papers were published. There wasn't a single disease on the list that I had where there hadn't been at least a couple of papers published suggesting that changes in the microbiome were associated with a given disease.
And I've seen, for example, little kids who've had tremendous behavioral issues. One little girl comes to mind, she was 9 years old. She was this beautiful little girl, and it was a complete terror. She'd be kicked out of her class multiple times every day. She could barely make it home on the bus without being kicked off. She was terrorizing her sister, would bite her and be violent. She would rip pictures of her family off, and she was a really scary little kid. I did some testing on her and found out she had massive overgrowth of bacteria in her small intestine and also massive overgrowth of yeast in her gut. I gave her an antibiotic and an antifungal. I gave her probiotics and some things to normalize her gut function. And within a few days, literally, her behavior completely changed.
When we connect the fact that the immune system is a primary source of inflammation for the body, all of a sudden we see this huge tie-in where one of the major seats of this chronic inflammation that we see in the West may be coming from the small intestine. Not exclusively, but a major contributing factor.
Everything is not the microbiome, but a large majority of it is, and we're learning more every day about it. So again, in functional medicine, it's the first thing we look at, it's the first thing we treat, and it often leads to astounding results.
The current healthcare model looks at what's wrong and chases symptoms, dispensing multiple drugs to suppress the smoke alarms going off in the body. This new model of functional medicine looks at what's wrong and deals with the underlying cause. It recognizes that the microbiome plays a central role in our overall health, and we simply cannot look at disease without assessing the overall health of our guts and microbiome. Some of the key tools in healing the gut are digestive enzymes like protease, amylase, and lipase. Hydrochloric acid, which helps break down proteins and foods in the stomach. L-glutamine, which helps repair the gut lining. Prebiotic fibers, which help feed beneficial bacteria. Zinc, fish oil, vitamin A, curcumin, and quercetin. This is just some of the wisdom on the subject. Our teams put together a vast array of resources for you in the Interconnected Companion Guide. It's filled with natural substances you could take to start healing your gut right now. Now, if you want to get the Companion Guide and help support our quest to heal chronic disease for folks who are hurting, all you have to do is click the button below this video and find out how to get access to the full Interconnected documentary series. Plus, you'll get a collection of powerful bonus resources that'll help you get the most out of the series. It's all available at a discounted event-only price today. And not only will you have lifetime access to everything you've seen in these episodes in 3 formats of video, audio, and text transcripts, you'll also get companion guides on home fermentation, natural antibiotics and natural painkillers, and you'll also get the extended interviews on these topics that weren't covered in the episodes. I'm also bringing the experts in here, a number of them, for live Q&As. And I'll tell you, listen, this is a wonderful event that's happening in these 9 days, and it's only heavily discounted during the event, so don't miss out. We learned a lot about overall gut health in this episode, and in the next one, it's time to turn our attention to specifics. We're going to take a look at our use of antibiotics and what they do to the microbiome. We'll dispel the myth that probiotics are the simple answer to all of this and get into real strategies that actually work. Even if you haven't taken many antibiotics, you're going to be surprised at how much you're exposed to them in our food supply. Stay with us on this and much more in the series, like why you might not be able to drop those extra pounds or why you're feeling so depressed. Here's a hint. The microbiome may have a lot to do with it. And the good news is we're finding solutions. So stay with us as we explore more healing secrets of the microbiome on Interconnected. We'll see you soon.